without God, you nothing. Ain't that right? With him, you everything. Because in him is everything. Think about it. Think about how it would be if you knew everything. Evil system and take the soul system and take one planet, Earth, and we own that. They take Earth and then come to North America. They come to North America, they come as you. Who says, he didn't just die for us, he died as us. Called her to sing for a reason. Think about it. Your voice is attuned to God, and then he wants you to give back praise to him, because without God, you nothing. Ain't that right? With him, you everything. Because in him is everything. Think about it. Think about how it would be if you knew everything. Why did he put you there if he knew he didn't need you for that? Am I right? Right. And so it's like this, what would happen if the girl that was singing, that she got hoarse and couldn't sing, and you sitting there and say, I don't sing. Lord said, I want you to sing today. Go, wait a minute, she's supposed to sing. He said, no, she can't sing today, but I'm calling you to do it. Would you do it? Would you do it? If he said it to you, question is, will you do what the Lord tells you to do, or you do what you want to do? The Bible says, you bought with a price, therefore you're not your own. So you don't belong to you no more. It's not being stupid, but what you have to do is throw your will back to him. It's his will that prevails. See, because his will is the one that's going to rule on everything. Think about that. A lot of people, that's what happens. People don't get saved. They never find out it's not their will no more. Jesus, the Lord's trying to synchronize heaven with earth. Jesus prayed, he said, thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Which means he's trying to coordinate heaven with earth. Time coming, it's going to all come together. But while we're doing it, what are we doing to synchronize ourselves with heaven and earth? Think about it. Think about it now. You think about it. I'm just looking at you. He said, why do you think you're here? I'm not asking you to ask, but why do you think you're here now? My brother, why do you think you're here now? Why do you think he put you here? Why do you think he put you in this church? Why do you think he wanted to hear this message? Why do you think he wants you to hear something different today? He says, because the Lord showed me, he said, you a man that investigates and you want to see proof. And because you want to see proof, don't give me no act. You hate people that act. Am I right? Right. You don't like people to act, but you want people to tell you the truth. That's how you've been all your life. You don't want folk to come and lie to me and try to play around. You don't like to play around. You want the truth, because give it to me straight. Give it to me straight so I can find out what I'm supposed to do. Then once I find it out, I ain't got to worry about the rest, because I know how to take care of it. Because I listen to the Lord, I listen to what he tells me to do. But I've seen some folk, they got high and mighty because they got the truth the wrong way. And that's what you don't want. People say you can't get saved right on wrong information. My old pastor used to say that. You can't get saved right on wrong information. And what you don't want is wrong information. Is you related to the sister right said? How you related to it? Sister. And so you know how your sister is. And she's the one that sings, right? Right. And she was growing up, she used to sing a lot. She had to figure out what is it for. Then when she found out when she got saved, whenever that was, and got here, she started seeing what her purpose became right. And so she enjoys the presence, because when she releases it, it helps everybody else here. It helps her even more. And that's sister too. And so y'all all here for a reason. It's a reason why y'all came, because y'all could tell this man ain't trying to hide nothing. He ain't playing. He's going to give it to you straight. That's all you want. Because the brother is the one y'all look up to, because y'all know he ain't going to take no mess. Am I right? Right. And they know he ain't going to take no mess. And that's why y'all here, because they're saying he ain't giving no mess. He going to give what y'all need. But sometimes, he's a lawyer, there's a lot of things you're trying to get in life that you hadn't really got, because your family, nothing against your family, but some things happen in your family that y'all trying to get, that you getting here. Not that your family was messed up, it's just that y'all seeing a lot of things now that y'all here in this country, It's a reason why you're here. The reason why you put you here in this particular section of life. Because God knows what he's doing. Because he knows that y'all growing. People don't realize how much y'all growing. But you don't publicize. And so, and this is what I just saw. This is fun. The Lord let me see sometimes y'all talking and your brother says, am I right? And so, because you're a smart man. And so it's a lot of things you see. And that's why you don't realize how prophetic you really are. Because you're prophetic, that's why you see in things in the future. And that's why you see things clearly sometimes. You try to explain to folk and they don't get it. It's because you see it. It's called a prophetic observation. And so people think you're being critical when you're not. You're just saying what you see. That makes sense now? Right. And so a lot of people have to do, they become prophetic. That's the problem they end up having because they see stuff, they try to explain to folk, and if people think they're being critical, all they're doing is saying what they see. And when they say what they see, folk don't get it because they can't see it. But it's obvious to them. And so what the Lord is doing, what I see, Pastor Micah, is that he bringing you folk that are prophetic, that are here, and as they learn, it's going to cause them to grow. Because it's certain people you wanted to come, you invited them, but they took it the wrong way. Because what you saw more than this. Because you saw more than this, you expect them to come, but they looking at it critically. They're not looking at it prophetically. That makes sense? Right. And so as this church, as it begins to grow, it's more folk gonna come in here that are hungry for the word of God. They're hungry for God because that's what you want. You want people that are hungry, not folk that are, I will put this, not people on the top, folk that just want God. And so the Lord is letting you see that more, and just wait. He said, remember he says, have patience. It's a pace he's got you at. And so it's a pace the Lord is trying to get us at. Just like, because you're the magistrate, right? Right. And so people don't realize that as a magistrate, it's a lot of people you see, you can discern stuff on them, but you can't say it. And based on that, you have to look at the statute and with the forms they say you have to put the bond at. But sometimes you want to change it because you get mad at it because this person don't need a $5,000 bond. They need $150 because they really not guilty of it, but you can see it. But you can't get your opinion yet because you want to keep your job. And because you want to keep your job, the Lord told you just wait. Watch. Because you see a lot bonds you set when they get to court, the judge sees it and changes it around because they ain't ready to do it yet. Am I making sense? Right. And so magistrate's job, people don't understand about a magistrate's job. They don't realize what they have to discern and what they have to see. And they can see folk that when they come in, that they have to get themselves straight. You can see it because the stuff that happened to them was based on a reaction, not a response. And so they had to learn about a response. And so what you're learning to do is respond now as you start to get into it. And as you get into it, the Lord give you limited time to do this anyway. And you trying to rush to get that stuff done. He said, just take your time. He got you straight on what your next venture is going to be. Because it's going to be, just like they say in the Army, it's going to be an adventure. And so just think about the way you are now. And you imagine too, right? Right. And so the same thing she's looking at is that you another section because you see there's another person you have to deal with that pisses you off. And you trying to show them what to do, and they still had the big head. And they don't want to act right because you're doing your job. And because you're doing your job, they mad at you when you do stuff right. And they try to get at you based on what the criteria is for a magistrate. And you be trying to tell them and they don't understand it. And since you've been trying to explain it, the Lord said, just calm down from them. You just get with me and I give you the peace. That a couple of days ago he showed me. He do it a couple of days because you going like, okay, Lord, I need some help with this person right here. I almost said the name of the Lord, so I can't say it. But he said, he knows what you are there for a reason. That's why you're there, because you have aspirations beyond that. And because your aspirations beyond that, the Lord said, I'm setting you up for that. It's a person just like, wow. I'm trying to get too deep with this, but I'm just Lord, let me see stuff. What happens when I preach? It's like He'll show me stuff, and I have to watch and saying it, because I don't try to reveal too much information, right? It's like folk had the wrong idea about people that are prophetic. They like to use. Like, let me ask you this: anybody here, like somebody came and read your mail? They use that term to read your mail. Ain't nobody reading your mail. God didn't deliver it to you. It's not reading your mail. It's just discernment that the Lord does through somebody's prophetic. That's all it is. That's all it is. And that's what you do sometimes. They think you read their mail when you start talking to your coworkers. And they get mad because they used to go around, how you know all that? You just being yourself. Am I right? That's all they doing. That's all we had to do. Just like you, when you preach, some of the messages you give, people going like, was he at my house when I was praying? It's because the Lord told you that, and what you do is just give it out. That's all you do. And so our lives, Lord has already set us in motion to do what's next. Just like my brother playing on the thing right there. They don't know what kind of struggle he had just to play now. Today was a rough day, but he made it anyway. Am I right? And so he made it because he knew he needed to come. Lord didn't explain him to fully, but now he sees why now. Am I right? He's going like, all right. What I like about the Lord is that the way He works is for us. And when He reveals stuff, it's for us to get to a certain place that He already has for us to get to. And then once we do that, and then we start walking with Him, we start more and more. I'm almost finished. Are you sure? But what I like, y'all, is that life is good in the Lord once you find out who He is to you. And that's where you can express to other folk how good He really is. And so folk don't understand where they are because they mad about it. And they don't know who He is. And so sometimes you can tell folk, what I find out is that the Lord can tell you stuff and you don't know why you telling Him. And then I find out this when I used to be a public defender. One day the guy was in my office and the Lord told me, He said, while he was talking to me, He said, listen, He said, I want you to lead him to Christ. I'm talking to the Lord about talking to Him. I said, I'm going to lead this man to Christ. The Lord said, the door opened up. So I kept on talking to him. Then he said, yo, man. He said, man, I got a drinking problem. I said, you do, man? I said, man, I had a drinking problem too, man. So I went to a program. It was open 24 hours, 7 days a week. I said, the counselor, he didn't get sleepy, man. It was open 24 hours, 7 days a week. It didn't cost me nothing. He said, I went through the program, man. When I finished, he said, I was delivered from it, man. And I thanked him for it. He kept going. He said, man, he said, it didn't cost you nothing. I said, no. He said, man, what program was that? I said, Jesus Christ. He said, I knew something was funny about that. And then I led him to Christ. He got saved. Here's what happened. A year later, he got murdered. The Lord told me, He said, the reason why I had you to talk to him because I knew he was going to go. And so when I realized the Lord would tell you stuff to do stuff, you don't know why. That's why He loves obedience. When you obey Him, there's some things you don't understand, but later He may let you see. And so you don't realize how your life is because you're a point of contact for some folk. I had one girl, same thing happened. I tried to lead her to Christ, but she didn't want it. 5 months later, they found her under a house, murdered. I learn from my lessons sometimes. I've talked to folk, and the Lord will tell me, He said, look, I just what I want you to do. And I do it. Just like my barber, his friend was cut hair, and I started telling him, he wasn't Muslim, but he started talking about this stuff. And so the Lord kept giving me stuff to write to him. I wrote to him. I said, the Lord really wants you. And he listened. He really didn't do anything. Then 5 months later, he had a heart attack and died right at his house. But what I'm telling y'all is this. There's timing the Lord always has. We're in a season of timing. And because we're in a season that the Lord wants us to discern, that's one of the gifts, discern spirits. He said, because you can't make that a New Year's resolution, you need to do it now before New Year gets here, as we go in. And so what happened, Pastor Micah, as time goes on, He's going to give you that as you start seeing the folk that join. And you have to be very careful to understand it, because this is what happened. This about maybe 5 or 6 years ago. The guy, he made the altar call, had people come forward, and they, say, "Is He your Lord?" Yeah, they don't so like that. What they didn't know was that he had handled a certain spirit, and the guy was a devil worshiper. When he was saying Lord, he was talking about the Lord, the devil. And what happened, because he understood what to do, he moved up in the organization. He was causing a bunch of havoc. They didn't know he was worshiping the devil. They had no discerning the spirit. So what they had to realize, you have to realize discerning the spirit is going to be key. Just like both of them, they've dealt with folk that have come here. They could tell that they demonically, something ain't right with them, but they had to be able to deal with it. They deal with it because they can't necessarily do what they want to do right then because Lord said it ain't time. But it's time for you when it comes for you, because if they want to be bold in the house of God, you be just as bold. Right. Y'all, what I'm seeing is that now we're in a good time the Lord wants us to be in. He's going to get us what we need for our time. As our time moves on, we're going to get more. And the more and more you talk to him, the more and more he's going to reveal. The more he's going to reveal is what you're going to do with it. He's going to teach you what to do. And so next time you get a chance, I think it's Job chapter 1, verse 4. Teach me, Lord, what to say to you. Holy Ghost can help you do that. Teach you what to say with it. Because you got a will. Remember Jesus said, not my will, thine be done. Which lets me know Jesus had a will. You got a will. He said, not my will, yours. So it's not your will, it's his be done. And as you learn that, it's going to help you as life moves on. When the Lord tells me to stop, I stop. I can't do more than he told me to say. So I appreciate it.